surrender. In Baghdad, Saddam Hussein was told of the news.
Saddam said our young soldiers were behaving like women. They weren't fighting like real men. This wasn't fair to our proud army. Our army didn't believe in this war. It was a dirty war, this war in Kuwait.
The Marines in the lead tanks headed for Saddam's second line of defense, armored divisions from the regular army.
10th Marines, this is Control. Is the last of your unit on Red 1 yet?
The command posts waited for the first chemical attack.
We got 10th Marines forward through yet?
But Baghdad had taken a decision.
Roger, Division 4.
We didn't think that it was wise to use them. That's all what I can say, that it was not wise to use such kind of weapons in such kind of a war with such an enemy.
If chemicals had killed large numbers of the Marines threading their way through the minefields, the Pentagon planned to flood Baghdad with 6 feet of water.
Knocking off the dams on the Tigris and Euphrates rivers would have caused enormous destruction downstream. The loss of civilian life would have been terrible, and we really had not thoroughly analyzed. We knew how to hit the dams, but I don't know if we analyzed what the effect downstream would have been. But nevertheless, it would have been a good one to threaten the Iraqis with. And of course, there was always the implicit threat of nuclear weapons. I don't think we ever would have used them. But nevertheless, the Iraqis didn't know that. And we could have if provocation is serious enough.
Lay down your weapons, come up. We will not hurt you. We are here to help you.
In these first hours, 8,000 Iraqis were captured.
Be home soon.
After Vietnam, the American military vowed never to underestimate an enemy. But in Vietnam, the enemy had fought for a cause he was willing to die for.
My own guess is that about 75% of them gave up and about 25% fought. As the day wore on, I began to become elated.
In Schwarzkopf's war room, relief mixed with the fear of heavy counterattacks. But the attacks were not materializing. By the morning's end, Schwarzkopf came to realize the Marine success was endangering his plan to trap the Republican Guard. The U.S. Marines had advanced into Kuwait so quickly the Republican Guard hadn't come south to counterattack. Schwarzkopf's plan to lure them to destruction was failing. And the American and British tank forces were not due to attack until the following day. That would give the Republican Guard time to escape.
I decided to move the main attack up to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. One of the principles of the overall campaign was to inflict as much damage on the Republican Guard as we possibly could, and they were sitting very, very deep, you know, out back in the desert. And so, therefore, it became obvious that if we were going to inflict that damage on the Republican Guard, we had to go ahead and inflict it as early as possible.
In the 30 minutes before the troops attacked, British and American artillery fired 11,000 rounds at the Iraqi front lines ahead.
Building 0324, 4500. Stop. Altitude plus 337.
For the first time, the British used the MLRS, the multiple launch rocket system. Each rocket exploded above the enemy troops, spraying the ground with hundreds of grenades. In those 30 minutes, over 600,000 MLRS grenades fell on the Iraqi positions. The general leading the attack was a careful and methodical soldier. He'd seen war before. In Vietnam, he'd lost one of his legs.
Memories of Vietnam are very sharp, clear to me. I mean, never far from my mind, and especially during the Gulf War. We didn't say it to each other, but I think we all felt that we're going to do it right this time.
As the barrage lifted, American and British troops surged across the desert. This was the army that had been stationed in Europe to fight World War III against the Soviets. Now, the end of the Cold War allowed it to be unleashed against Iraq. The general is expected 2 days of fighting to breach the front-line defenses, followed by 6 days of fierce tank battles with the Republican Guard.
I thought that we would lose somewhere between, in the breaching units, that we would lose somewhere between 20 and 40%.
The American 1st Infantry Division had the job of storming the trenches to clear a path for the British tanks. To avoid hand-to-hand fighting, they planned to bury alive the Iraqi defenders.
A thought occurred to me, we could actually use these plows to fill in the trenches. In fact, I tested it myself. I got down in the ditch myself and had 2 tanks plow towards me just to see what it did. I learned several things. One is I learned that it happens very quickly. So the defender has a choice to make, but he has to make it very quickly. He can either give up and hop out of the trench. He can try to run down the trench and get away, but he better do those quickly because these things move at amazing speed down there.
Along the Iraqi border ran a sand barrier, a berm. Beyond it lay 5 miles of minefields, and then the Iraqi trenches. 60 miles of trenches were plowed under. Most Iraqis surrendered. The official army estimate is that 150 were buried. Before dawn, 10 Special Forces teams had flown ahead of the advance and hidden behind enemy lines. Concealed in hides, they peered through peepholes, watching for signs of an Iraqi counterattack or for the deployment of chemical or nuclear weapons. One team, Alpha 525, hid on the banks of a drainage canal.
There was 2 girls and a small boy, and they come up and actually looked into the peephole, into the face of the sergeant that was inside the peephole. 2 of my soldiers left the hide site, the back of it, into the ditch with automatic silenced weapons and a silenced pistol, and actually had these children in the sights of the pistol and inquiring of me, what are we going to do? What should we do with these children? Should we shoot them? And I know in my heart, had I told them to shoot, they would have shot them children. But it was an instantaneous decision. No, we're not going to shoot children. It's not their war.
Alpha 525 was soon attacked by 150 soldiers. They killed 40, but the attacks kept coming.
I can remember feeling inside myself that, my gosh, we're all going to die here. There's no way that we can get out of this. They would mount attacks, and they would give out a yell, an Arab battle cry, like, and it was terrifying.
American F-16s were called in. The men below flashed a mirror to show their position.
And it really wasn't until we was on the helicopter and well on our way back that finally it hit me, like we made it out of here without a single soldier hurt, which was a miracle.
In Washington, it was Sunday morning. President Bush was awaiting news. Heavy casualties risked the destruction of his presidency and the abandonment of the war.
I got briefed just before I went into the church. The president was right ahead of me. I passed him a note that said, Mr. President, things are going very well. We all went back to the White House. I got out a map from Time magazine to sort of show him exactly what was happening. And I was able to tell him there that things were going extraordinarily well.
we had assumed that the toughest part of the ground war in terms of casualties would have been the